AI breakthroughs have been a question of when, not if.
Google unveiling long-awaited new details about its large language model Gemini.
Claude 3, it is arguably now one of the most powerful AI models out there, if not the most powerful.
Preview, if you will, for us ChatGPT 5.
I expect it to be a significant leap forward.
But what if that core assumption that models can only keep getting bigger and better is now fizzling?
Is there really a slowing in progress because that wasn't expected?
It could spell cracks in the NVIDIA bull story.
We're increasing GPUs at the same rate, but we're not getting the intelligence improvements out of it.
Calling into question the gigantic ramp in spending from Amazon, Google, Microsoft. A rush for tangible use cases and a killer app. I'm Deirdre Bosa with the Tech Check Take. Has AI progress peaked?
This is definitely going to be an interesting topic. I do think there's been so much hype about AI. Something that they were discussing was processing for graphics cards, which is one of the best ways to run AI models by default, just due to what they're optimized for versus CPUs. And so one of the things to keep in mind here is one of the issues that I think they might be covering is that regardless of how much processing you do, there's also context awareness that is necessary for an AI model. And so this is something that I run into day to day with what I'm working on as well, which is in order to actually run the model, you need to pass it something for it to reference. And so basically what this would mean in a standard ChatGPT example would be how much data could you share with ChatGPT for it to process the question that you have for it? So a quick example of that would be maybe you ask it to update your resume and then you give it a previous version of it. And so it will try to make its best guess as to how to improve what you currently have. Adding more on top of that would be maybe showing your previous resume and then also adding in a paragraph or two about your latest work, for instance. And then you could keep building on from there. You could add previous versions of your resume. You could add in your annual reviews. And so you could keep adding data and data and data on top of it. And for certain questions, you're probably not going to add all that much, which is how I think most users probably interact with AI models. But the really advanced stuff requires you to add in a lot of information. So something as a similar example would be, we did the resume here. What if you used AI for determining whether a student should enter your college, for instance, and whether or not they are applicable there? You might want to include maybe their essay, maybe some standardized test scores. Maybe you want to even share in the exact grades they got for particular classes. But because every class is different per school, you also might need to add in descriptions for every class. And then maybe to go beyond that, you need descriptions for the class and then everybody's grades within that class as well. So that way you could figure out exactly where that student falls into. And so an example like that, where you're trying to get a better and better answer and take in more and more things into account, you need to load all of that stuff up into memory if you want to do a really good job of it. And so this is where processing isn't the only thing that's necessary for an AI model, though processing is one of the things that can help you scale an existing model up very quickly. But the amount of data you could actually use in training a model or actually execution of a model can grow very quickly as you get into more and more advanced use cases. And so this is where processing or doubling the number of GPUs you have will likely just help you double how many requests you're getting of simple requests, not necessarily allowing you to 2x the number of requests and make them more complicated at the same time.
Call it performance anxiety, the growing concern in Silicon Valley that AI's rapid progression is losing steam.
We've really slowed down in terms of the amount of improvement.
Reached a ceiling and is now slowing down.
In the pure model competition, the question is, when do we start seeing a asymptote to scale?
Hitting walls that even the biggest players, from OpenAI to Google, can't seem to overcome. Progress didn't come cheap. Billions of dollars invested to keep pace, banking on the idea that returns, they would be outsized too. But no gold rush is guaranteed to last, and early signs of struggle are now bubbling up at major AI players. The first indication that things are turning, the lack of progression between models.
I expect that the delta between 5 and 4 will be the same as between 4 and 3.
Each new generation of OpenAI's flagship GPT models, the ones that power ChatGPT, they have been exponentially more advanced than the last in terms of their ability to understand, generate, and reason. But according to reports, that's not happening anymore.
There was talk prior to now that these companies were just going to train on bigger and bigger and bigger systems. If it's true that it's top, that's not going to happen anymore.
OpenAI has led the pack in terms of advancements. Its highly anticipated next model, called Orion, it was expected to be a groundbreaking system that would represent a generational leap in bringing us closer to AGI, or artificial general intelligence. But that initial vision, it's now being scaled back. Employees who have used or tested Orion told the information that the increase in quality was far smaller than the jump between GPT-3 and 4, and that they believed Orion isn't reliably better than its predecessor at handling certain tasks like coding.
To put in perspective, remember, ChatGPT came out at the end of 2022. So now it's been, close to 2 years. And so you had initially a huge ramp up in terms of what all these new models can do. And what's happening now is you've really trained all these models, and so the performance increases are kind of leveling off.
The same thing may be happening at other leading AI developers. The startup Anthropic, it could be hitting roadblocks to improving its most powerful model, the Opus, quietly removing wording from its website that promised a new version of Opus later this year. And sources telling Bloomberg that the model didn't perform better than the previous versions as much as it should, given the size of the model and how costly it was to build and run. These are startups focused on one thing, the development of large language models with billions of dollars in backing from names like Microsoft and Amazon and venture capital. But even Google, which has enough cash on hand to buy an entire country, it may also be seeing progress plateau.
The current generation of LLM models are roughly, few companies have converged at the top, but I think we're all working on our next versions too. I think the progress is going to get harder. When I look at 25, the low-hanging fruit is gone. The curve, the hill is steeper.
Its principal AI model, Gemini, is already playing catch-up to OpenAI and Anthropic's. Now Bloomberg reports, quoting sources, that an upcoming version is not living up to internal expectations.
Yeah, this is definitely going to become a problem. Because again, as these people are trying to make a generic model, they're trying to solve so many problems at the same time. And so you need more and more data to train it on. And once you get to a certain threshold of data, you also have to start worrying about overtraining the model. And so I think this was something that they had mentioned with Orion previously, which is like, in some ways, it might not actually even be performing better. And this is because if you have one model that tries to do everything, when you try to improve it, you might be trying to teach it things on like maybe being better at having a conversation or understanding the intent behind a question. But then that data is potentially going to be counterproductive for things like coding, for instance. Or maybe even it adds uncertainty to the coding segment of like maybe when a coding question is brought up, maybe there's a negative interaction between how you taught it about speech and the usage of certain terms and how those terms are used in a coding example or an engineering example. And so these are going to be problems that they're going to start to run into more and more as they get more and more in depth on some of these things. So I'm not particularly surprised. Again, AI is like a tool like any other. And so this is where like you're never going to have one screwdriver that like every human being needs and they never buy any other screwdriver. The reason why we have multiple screwdrivers is because there's different use cases for it. And there's going to be a generic one that you probably default to of probably some standard size and dimension that is just generally easy to handle and useful for most cases. But then you probably also have run into that scenario where, well, what happens if you need to screw something into a corner and that's pretty hard? Or what if it's something that has something kind of blocking it, so you need to have the screwdriver a little bit farther away, or maybe it's not at the right angle that you need to be, et cetera, et cetera. And so as you try to solve any problem, this makes it harder and harder and harder. And there's never going to be one size fits all for screwdrivers, and there's never going to be one size fits all for AI either.
has to make you think, okay, are we going to go through a period here where we're going to need to digest all this hundreds of billions of dollars we've spent on AI over the last couple of years, especially if revenue forecasts are getting cut or not changing, even though you're increasing the spending you're doing on.
This is a great point that he's brought up. Not related to the specific topic that they're having, at least as far as I can tell. But just because I think even CNBC, but also other companies like Google and Meta, etc., have highlighted how they've done all these layoffs because AI is so great and they got all this efficiency from it. This is something that I'm actually seeing in the industry, which is there's definitely ways AI is improving your business, but no company is seeing such incredible improvement from such a small time frame across their entire business model, such that they could be cutting off 10-20% of their company because they got 20% improvement in every portion of their business. That doesn't make any sense from an AI model that they built in-house. And these are like the industry leaders. They have trillions of dollars flowing to AI. And so I just want to highlight that point because so many companies highlight how successful they have been with AI. It's actually very hard to be successful with AI and the application of it. And just wanted to highlight that they are using a source here where they're highlighting themselves that the companies are not showing as clear benefit for how much they're investing in AI. They're almost certainly gaining benefit from it, but it's not at a similar pace, even though some companies will tote this because it's much better to say, I'm cutting people from the company because I was so successful at AI and implementing it and using it that my company is just so much more efficient. And that's a way better story to tell your investors and the public than I invested a bunch of money in AI. It didn't work out. I didn't figure out how to use it. We're losing money here. We got to make some cuts somewhere, which is what's happening in a lot of places.
AI.
The trend has even been confirmed by one of the most widely respected and pioneering AI researchers, Ilya Sutskever, who co-founded OpenAI and raised $1 billion seed round for his new AI startup.
As you scale up pre-training, a lot of the low-hanging fruit was plucked. And so it makes sense to me that you're seeing a deceleration in the rate of improvement.
But not everyone agrees the rate of progress has peaked.
Foundation model pre-training scaling is intact, and it's continuing. As you know, this is an empirical law, not a fundamental physical law.
Of course, NVIDIA's CEO is not going to highlight any issues for AI. Their stock has skyrocketed based off of this AI bubble, so to speak, that we're in. And so why would they, being one of the primary individuals who have profited from all this hype around AI, tell the market in any way or signal in any way that they have concerns over AI and its progress? That's definitely not a reliable source, because obviously the person who is going to make the most money off of it is going to highlight that there's still room to grow.
But the evidence is that it continues to scale.
Nothing I've seen in the field is out of character with what I've seen over the last 10 years or leads me to expect that things will slow down.
There's no evidence that the scaling laws, as they're called, have begun to stop. They will eventually stop, but we're not there yet.
And even Sam Altman posting simply, there is no wall. OpenAI and Anthropic, they didn't respond to requests for comment. Google says it's pleased with its progress on Gemini and has seen meaningful performance gains and capabilities like reasoning and coding. Let's get to the why. If progress is in fact plateauing, it has to do with scaling laws. The idea that adding more compute power and more data guarantees better models to an infinite degree. In recent years, Silicon Valley has treated this as religion.
One of the properties of machine learning, of course, is that the larger the brain, the more data we can teach it, the smarter it becomes. We call it the scaling law. There's every evidence that as we scale up the size of the models, the amount of training data, the effectiveness, the quality, the performance of the intelligence improves.
In other words,
so again, I think theoretically speaking, that is probably true. I think AI models are going to continue to improve. again, I think the issue that occurs here that I don't think they've quite referenced, which is the data we are using to train models is being generated by other human beings. And one of the issues you have is human beings aren't perfect. And so naturally, as you use more and more things that are human generated, so like if you use questions online, blogs, etc., the more chance you have for something to be conflicting in the data set that you are presenting to the AI model. And that could cause issues downstream. Because again, you get to an issue where you'd have to start curating this data at a whole other scale for you to keep making these models better and better. And so I don't think the bottleneck at this point, considering they've already gotten the low-hanging fruit, which I do agree with, is just throwing memory and processing power at AI models. Likely you're going to have to start thinking about, well, how do these models purely function? And sometimes, again, models can be broken up into a variety of ways, and also they can try to compartmentalize themselves into like subcomponents. Or maybe you could have a model that decides which model you're going to use, or adjusts and smooths out the output of multiple models or multiple decisions. You're going to run into an issue where your data is unreliable and potentially conflicting, and you're going to have to figure out how to solve that as you continue to scale, because you are going to need more and more data in order to make a model that's smarter and smarter and smarter than the previous versions. And likely we're at a point where that's just an infeasible amount of data curation, where I think it's at least suspected for like ChatGPT, etc., that they're literally just pumping in like Wikipedia, like Quora or other online sources, Stack Overflow, and they're literally just letting it loose on a bunch of data, maybe Twitter, etc., that exists, but also comes from a human source, which does not necessarily mean it's not conflicting. If anything, the more times you get human involvement, the more conflicting it can get, either through like sarcasm, typos, internet trolls, etc. Like there's going to be so much data that is probably counterproductive, and also just people being ignorant. They just might not know what the right answer is. And so you're going to have to look through all of that data and make sure that data is even more accurate than the previous data. And that's going to be a huge problem in my mind for models to keep getting better at a very similar rate, because likely you're going to need exponentially more data to get a model to be better and better. And then once you get to that scale that probably these companies are, like Google or OpenAI, etc., are probably at such a large scale of data that like to get another 2x more data on top of whatever they currently have is probably just such a Herculean effort that they probably can't undergo easily. And so they're likely just trying to train with what they can and trying to optimize certain things. And again, even the people who are testing these things aren't going to be experts. Because you're going to need someone to be an expert at coding, translating, answering questions. And there's so many things they use like ChatGPT for, which maybe the developers of that model are not experts in. Like you could ask it for like a workout routine. Those people probably don't know nutrition or necessarily biology. And so they're still trying to train a model to do things that maybe they themselves can't do them at the point. And so that's going to be a problem for them to deal with going forward.
All you need to do is buy more NVIDIA GPUs, find more articles or YouTube videos or research papers to feed the models, and it's guaranteed to get smarter. But recent development suggests that may be more theory than law.
People call them scaling laws. That's a misnomer, like Moore's law is a misnomer. Moore's law, scaling laws, they're not laws of the universe. They're empirical regularities. I am going to bet in favor of them continuing, but I'm not certain of that.
The hitch may be data. It's a key component of that scaling equation, but there's only so much of it in the world, and experts have long speculated that companies would eventually hit what is called the data wall. That is, run out of it.
If we do nothing, and if, at scale we don't continue innovating, we're likely to face similar bottlenecks in data like the ones that we see in computational capability and chip production or power or data center build-outs.
I'm probably not one to talk, but they got probably like the youngest looking expert to reference AI possible to dissuade those big hitting CEOs from Google and NVIDIA. They decided to like pick up like a random like 21-year-old from some startup he made right out of college or something to be their source for this, which is funny. I actually don't know anything about him, so I apologize if you're actually older than I think you are. I just find it amusing that that was the example they used to combat these like 50-plus-year-old big time CEOs.
So AI companies have been turning to so-called synthetic data, data created by AI, fed back into AI, but that could create its own problem.
AI is an industry which is garbage in, garbage out. So if you feed into these models a lot of AI gobbledygook, then the models are just going to spit out more AI gobbledygook.
The Information reports that Orion was trained in part on AI-generated data produced by other OpenAI models, and that Google has found duplicates of some data in the sets used to train Gemini. The problem? Low-quality data, low-quality performance.
This is what a lot of the research that's focused on synthetic data is focused on, right? So if you don't do this well, you don't get much more than you started with.
But even if the rate of progress for large language models is plateauing, some argue that the next phase, post-training or inference, will require just as much compute power. Databricks CEO Ali Ghodsi says there's plenty to build on top of the existing models.
I think lots and lots of innovation is still left on the AI side. Maybe those who expected all of the ROI to happen in 2023, 2024, maybe they should readjust their horizons.
The place where the industry is squeezing to get that progress is shifted from pre-training, which is, lots of internet data, maybe trying synthetic data on huge clusters of GPUs, towards post-training and test-time compute, which is more about, smaller amounts of data, but is very high quality and very specific.
Feeding data, testing different types of data, adding more compute, that all happens during the pre-training phase, when models are still being built, before it's released to the world. So now companies are trying to improve models in the post-training phase. That means making adjustments and tweaks to how it generates responses to try and boost its performance. And it also means a whole new crop of AI models designed to be smarter in this post-training phase.
OpenAI just announcing an improved model, their AI model. They say it has better reasoning. This had been reportedly called Strawberry, so there's been a lot of buzz around it.
They're called reasoning models, able to think before they answer, and the newest leg in the AI race.
We know that thinking is oftentimes more than just one shot. And thinking requires us to maybe do multi-plans, multiple potential answers that we choose the best one from. Just like when we're thinking. We might reflect on the answer before we deliver the answer. Reflection. We might take a problem and break it down into step by step by step. Chain of thought.
If AI acceleration is tapped out, what's next? The search for use cases becomes urgent.
Just in the last multiple weeks, there's a lot of debate, or have we hit the wall with scaling laws? It's actually good to have some skepticism, some debate, because that, I think, will motivate, quite frankly, more innovation.
Because we've barely scratched the surface of what existing models can do.
The models are actually so powerful today, and we've not really utilized them to anywhere close to the level of capability that they actually offer to us and bring true business transformation.
OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, they're making some of the most compelling use cases yet.
OpenAI is getting into the search business.
Anthropic unveiling a new AI tool that can analyze your computer screen and take over to act on your behalf.
One of my favorite applications is Notebook LM. This Google application that came out. I used the living daylights out of it just because it's fun.
But the next phase, the development and deployment of AI agents, that's expected to be another game changer for users.
I think we're going to live in a world where there are going to be hundreds of millions of billions of different AI agents, eventually probably more AI agents than there are people in the world.
I spoke with NVIDIA after the call. They said, Jim, you better start thinking about how to use the term agentic when you're out there. Right. Because agentic is the term.
Benioff's been using it for a while.
He's very agentic.
Yeah. You can have health agents and banking agents and product agents and ops agents and sales agents and support agents and marketing agents and customer experience agents and analytics agents and finance agents and HR agents. And it's all built on this Salesforce platform.
Meaning it's all powered by software.
Everybody's talking about when is AI going to kick in for software. It's happening now. Well, it has to. It's not a future thing. It's now.
It's something the stock market is already taking note of. Software stocks seeing their biggest outperformance versus semis in years. And it's key for NVIDIA, which has become the most valuable company in the world and has powered broader market gains.
It's hard for me to imagine that NVIDIA can grow as fast as people are modeling. And I see that probably as a problem at some point when you get into next year and NVIDIA shipping Blackwell in volume, which is their latest chip. And then the vendors can say, okay, we're getting what we need, and now we just need to digest all this money that we've spent because it's not scaling as fast as we thought in terms of the improvements.
The sustainability of the AI trade hinges on this debate. OpenAI, xAI, Meta, Anthropic, and Google, they're all set to release new models over the next 18 months. Their rate of progress, or lack of it, could redefine the stakes of the race.
Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please hit like or subscribe. I'll see you around.